Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and you're listening to In the House. In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house. Electrical, really? Pop,
Sorry.
pop, pop.
Yeah, pop. Sorry.
Didn't realize your mic was hot, huh?
I had a 5 hour. I'm feeling good.
That's all right. We're ready to go. It's about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, air conditioning. Each week I'm joined by a panel of experts. Sometimes they make weird noises on the mic. Sometimes they answer questions and give you real information. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring you some value. Today we're going to be talking about septic systems, what all of you want to hear us talk about.
Riveting.
Maybe if you clicked on the episode and you're listening, then you actually are curious. I'm joined by Jesse and Chasen. They're the management team over the sewer and drain department at Any Hour Services. So let's actually start with this. What is the difference between just a standard sewer system that connects to the city municipality and a septic system?
It's a good question. There's a lot of differences, Mike.
Okay.
But we can go, we'll go into the basics, and then we can go deeper if we need to. But your sewer systems that tie into the municipality, your modern day sewer system is what it would be. It's pretty much simple form, a pipe that's connected to your home where all the waste dumps into, and then that pipe takes it over to the city's connection, which dumps into their pipe, and then that pipe takes it down to the treatment plant where they treat it and then do other things with that water. And so there really is nobody touching that unless they need to down at the sewer treatment plant, right? Now you jump over to a septic system, septic tank system, however, septic tank, whatever, a septic system. And that is a bit different, an older technology, still used today though in a lot of areas and has to be. There's a lot of new communities and things like that where they don't have the ability or they don't have grade to where they can have a modern day sewer system, so they have the septic system. Now that is where everything flows from a home or a building into one tank, and then it fills up to a certain point, and then most of the water leaks out the other end into what is called a leach field, a bunch of other plumbing with holes in it and everything, and that slowly leaches into the ground. That's why it's called a leach field. And then what's left in the tank over time just deteriorates, eats itself, bacteria, things like that. And so it's actually a very effective system, just a little bit older and requires a little bit more maintenance.
So you were saying that there are some new communities that are using a septic system?
Absolutely.
So because here in Utah, because I guess that's my thing. I am maybe falsely making an assumption that most homes in our service area have a standard sewer system.
Most homes do.
Okay.
That is a correct statement. But there are some areas, so like here in Utah, if you're up on the bench, like up on the hill, it really that is one area, because you won't have, the sewer will be either too high, and so your waste is trying to go uphill, and so that's not going to work. So you're going to need a pump or a septic system, or maybe out in the western areas of the state where the water table's too high, and so you can't have a basement or anything like that. And so there is no option or effective, safe way to have a sewer system. So you got to go with a septic system. So how do you come across people that don't know which kind they have? Maybe they make the assumption that it's just a regular plumbing system.
Yeah, we see that a lot, actually. It's supposed to be on the MLS listing when you buy a house. It actually has a section for sewer or septic, and it's supposed to be there. But either people
if it's in the fine print, there's an awful lot of fine print. I don't know.
And so either people don't see it, don't know to look for it, or even sometimes the seller didn't even know they were on a septic tank. And so, yeah, it's very important to know that you're on it. There's a number of reasons, the most important which being that you use it differently than you do a standard sewer system.
Let's go back real quick. Let's say that, so that's a good tip. If you're buying a house, it should be listed in the MLS information or whatever. But let's say that someone's in their house and they're not quite sure. They've always thought that it's regular. Is there something that they can find out, or how do they know if they're in a house and they're not quite sure?
Yeah, most of the time, if you call the city or the sewer district that you live in, or if you're in an unincorporated area, you can call the county.
Gotcha.
And they will have a record most of the time, some of the time, of whether or not you have a sewer line and where it runs and things like that. So you'll run into a couple situations. They'll either say, oh yeah, you're on a septic tank, it's located here, or they'll say, we don't have a record of your sewer line, which chances are then you're on a septic system.
Okay, that makes sense. So call your sewer district, and they should have record.
Right.
Will they tell you if they're like, I don't know?
Yeah, if they don't know, they'll tell you, I don't know. And then they'll recommend having somebody out to help you figure that out. And
will they send someone from the city, or do you have to call a company out?
That's going to depend on the city.
You'll get both.
Okay.
Yeah, you will. It just depends on, how much time they have to help you, or if they're, don't have anybody qualified to help you. So it just depends.
Well, let's talk about how a septic system works. Like you mentioned some things, Jesse, but let's go a little bit more in depth about how a septic system works. Now, growing up, I actually grew up in Louisiana, and I didn't realize this until later, but we were on a septic system. All I knew as a child was there was this area in the yard, and it probably wasn't working right, because there was this area in the yard where the grass always grew a lot taller, and it was always wet, and so we just knew not to throw the ball into the tall grass over there on that side of the yard. And when we would mow, it was so wet that we wouldn't even we would mow around it. So it was always a little bit higher so you could see what it was. And I think I asked one day, I was like, why is that always wet, or why is this? And they're like, it's the septic tank. It's not working right. Well, we didn't fix it.
Well, and you're working with a couple different things, especially down in Louisiana like that, where you have a real high water table. And so that means that leach field has to be more shallow than it would be in a dry area, because it's relying on the ground's ability to percolate that water and to accept that water into it. So if it's already got high groundwater and there's already water there's nowhere for that to go. And so they have to put them more shallow. And so then sometimes if it is slightly improper, it can easily make it to the surface.
Gotcha.
And that can also be sometimes in some of those shallow areas a sign of it is working okay. It's just an unfortunate side effect of having a septic tank in those areas at times. But the way they work, the inside of the home, and you jump in anywhere you want here, Jesse, the inside of the home is plumbed basically the exact same as a regular sewer system. And so all the plumbing still directs all the drain water to one location where it exits a home. And then you're still the same outside the home. You're in a sewer pipe. The difference comes when you hit the tank. And so in a sewer system, like Jesse mentioned earlier, that pipe just continues on off the property into the city's line, wherever that is. In a septic system, that line will go to the tank, which usually will have a baffle in it. There's a couple of reasons for a baffle. One of those being that direct the water down and force it down toward the bottom of the tank, so that inside that tank, the water and the solids can separate. And so if you could cut a full septic tank in half and have everything stay where it was, you'd see 3 layers inside a septic tank. The bottom layer we call the scum. That's where all the solids go. The poop, everything like that, sits down in the bottom.
I think we knew, what.
Well, I mean, I just like to be thorough.
And there's other solids.
Plenty of other solids.
There's other
rolling
solids
down
that go down the drain, but you immediately went to
fingernails, hair,
all the other stuff that you really shouldn't put into a septic system. Poop. Yeah, it's kind of fun to say into a microphone, isn't it? And then above the scum layer that is made up of various solids, you have the water level. And I mean, it's not clean water, but it's mostly liquid. And then above that, you have, I said those backwards. You've got the sludge at the bottom, scum at the top. Scum is your grease, your lotions, your cosmetics, the lightweight, greasy parts that get into that system. They float to the top. And so you have those 3 layers. After the tank, on the other side of it, there's the outlet pipe, which has another baffle, and that sits just a little bit lower than the inlet pipe coming into the tank. And it does that so water can flow in through the inlet without being too full for water to flow in, and then it flows out of the outlet. And so it leaves all the scum and the sludge inside the tank, and the water goes out into the drain field. The drain field's comprised of a few different pieces. You'll have one pipe coming out of that tank that typically will go to a distribution box. Then from that box, in most systems, you'll have 3 lines branching out from that distribution box.
Now, when you say box, now let's go to the tank, because when you say tank and then box, is one bigger than the other? Like, how big is a tank?
Yeah, standard tanks can range, but most of them are 500 to 1,000 gallons.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so from there, you go to the box, which is like a 5-gallon to 10-gallon box.
Okay, gotcha.
And its whole purpose is just to catch that water and distribute it equally through the 3 different lines in that drain field.
Okay.
And then the little talked about part of the system that is absolutely crucial is the soil around those drain pipes. So those pipes go out and you run them level. And in those pipes, there are holes for the water to be able to escape through as it runs through that line. And around that, you put, most cases, it's going to be gravel or some other aggregate that allows water to dissipate real easy. And then the soil around it receives that water after it gets through that aggregate. And so the bacteria that we talk about in septic systems, it lives and thrives inside the tank. And that helps to break down the solids so that you don't have to pump as frequently and keep things as liquid as possible. And then some of that also escapes into the leach field and lives and thrives in there as well. And so I'm sure we're going to talk about pumping at some point here. Are we at a good place to segue into it?
Do whatever you want.
I'm going to go pumping.
Pumps in general, I think, will be a totally different episode.
Pumping of the septic tank itself.
Oh, gotcha. Yep. Yeah, no, when we get to maintenance and different things like that, but if you want to talk about it right now, do what you got to do.
I don't want to throw you off.
Well, I mean, I can read a question and then say, "Oh, he already answered that."
So just make sure that you got a roofing analogy.
Yeah, we'll come up with one. And so, in the tank is where the bacteria is most important.
Okay.
But if you don't pump it often enough, and we'll go into more detail. If you don't pump it often enough, then that solid matter will build up to the point where it's able to escape into that drain field, and then the bacteria starts to build up more in there and escape into the soil around it. And then bacteria is remarkable in its resilience. It actually builds itself a slime coat around the bacteria, and that slime coat will fill in the soil around it and clog it up. And then it causes a failed drain field at that point. And once that happens, there's only one great way to really fix that, and that's redo the whole thing.
Really? So if your drain field fails because of whatever reason, there's no rehabbing it. You got to dig it up and redo it.
Some people are really good about their bacterial maintenance and keeping that in there, and that can help. But it's hard to come back from damage done. And so, that once it fails, the real good way to do it is dig it out and redo it. And that's a big process.
Yeah, and like Chasen said, it's hard to come back from failure. And one of the reasons, one of the other big reasons you can is because a lot of those drain fields don't have access. So like the tank, it has access for pumping and maintenance and things like that. But the drain fields usually do not have access for you to put any kind of bacteria treatment in there. And just putting it in your septic tank doesn't mean it's going to fill it up and make it out the back baffle and down in there and help. So and most of those don't have access because they're older septic systems where plumbing code didn't require them to have access, and some of the companies who deal with these and have learned will put in some accesses so that they can help better maintain those over the years. But your drain fields just don't have access, so it's kind of a build, put in place, and if it fails, you really just kind of deal with it or fix it.
In my mind, I'm thinking as you're describing this gel coating or the slime coating going around and essentially clogging up those holes that are supposed to be leaking the water out. In a mainline situation, if you had buildup around that, closing it off, you could send a jetter down there, right. But one of the principles there is that there's a place for that water to go, so you're able to scour the sides of the thing and clean that stuff off. But with with your field or your, what's it called?
Drain field.
With the drain field, the leach field, you can't send a jetter down because there's nowhere really for the water to go. There's not that much gravel to dissipate that water, and so you gotta figure out a way to clean it. And unfortunately, that's digging it up.
And furthermore to that point, even if you could jet it, you'd only be cleaning the inside of the pipe, and that slime coat builds up in the gravel and in the soil around it as well, and you can't clean that.
So even if you have bacteria treatment, it would take time for it to get into the soil to help treat the bacteria. So you would still essentially be down a sewer system waiting for that bacteria to clear up and clean up.
So let's talk about the bacteria a little bit, because you've mentioned it. And when we talk about the tank portion of it, when you are putting a septic system in, and you talked about bacterial maintenance. So one of my questions is talking about what do you do for maintenance? So let's just go into that section. Are you supposed to be is there some bacteria you're supposed to be putting into the system periodically?
Absolutely, yes. It's basically an enzyme that you put into there, and the different brands, there's several different brands that make it, and most instructions say just put it in the toilet once a month, flush it down, let it build up. Some people like to take it one step further, actually open the tank, pour it directly in, and either way is just fine. The biggest thing is making sure that as you're doing that, you're also not making it harder for that bacteria to do its job. And I'm sure that's another section we'll go into on how to use a septic tank properly. But the other maintenance to it is, even with a good thriving bacterial colony in there, the solids will continue to build up, depending on how many people you have in the home, how you use the system, things like that. And that's where pumping the tank becomes a necessity. And most septic tanks should be pumped every 3 to 5 years. That's kind of the standard. People who don't know they're on a septic tank, we've seen it be 20, 30 years, and they've had no idea they were on a septic tank. And then, like I mentioned earlier, with the solids getting to the drain field, now they're really up a creek. And so it's very important to make
What
sure.
kind of creek? I'm just kidding. Don't say that.
Ooh, it is. It's a show on Netflix.
Spelled differently.
Netflix is not a sponsor. If you'd like to be, please contact Mike Wilson, mike.wilson@anyhourservices.com.
My man.
But yeah, so the bacteria is absolutely crucial for the system to work, and there's a little bit of issue with climate. Those bacteria thrive in a warm environment, and here in Utah, when we get real cold weathers and areas that get even colder weathers, there's some of that bacteria that will die off if it gets too cold.
So is it more important in the winter months to be introducing bacteria into the system?
Yeah, it's always important, but it is more important in the winter, yes.
Okay. So we talked about maintenance really is the adding the bacteria every month, and then pumping it every 3 to 5 years. Okay. Any other maintenance things that they need to be doing?
Those are really the biggest things as far as maintenance goes. There's a lot of preventative things that need to happen as well, and we can go into that. But the pumping is something that is overlooked a lot, and there are tools you can get to actually measure how much buildup is in that tank and things to know where you're at. And the standard is anywhere from 25 to 33% of that tank being full of solids, it's time to pump it. Anything more than that, and you start getting solids into the drain field where you really don't want them.
And that's what causes that slimy buildup is when you get the solids that leak over into the leach field.
Because with those solids go the bacteria, and the bacteria is what causes that slime.
So do you ideally not want bacteria in your leach field?
You want some. But there's different types of bacteria. There's aerobic bacteria and anaerobic bacteria, and it depends on whether or not they can thrive with or without oxygen. And so the anaerobic bacteria can go without oxygen, and those are the ones that build the most slime coat and cause the most problems.
Well, and your the septic systems are designed for some of the bacteria to get in there, and then most of the bacteria to stay in the tank. And so if you're maintaining it like you should, like we're talking about, the septic system will do its thing. The right amount of bacteria will be in all the places it needs to be without failure. Without maintenance, you're going to get an excess buildup of anything, and that's just not in septic systems. We know that for almost everything that's out there now. Proper maintenance will allow the septic system to work as it's supposed to, because there's actually a lot of science based in the septic system.
Sure. You talked about there being 2 different bacterias, and one of the maintenance things is to introduce bacteria into the tank. Is there anything that we need to do to introduce this other kind of bacteria into the leach field?
So typically when you're using those bacterial products that they recommend for them, it will do both.
Got it.
And even some of the aerobics and things will actually cultivate on their own. Bacteria is an amazing thing in our planet, but it will find its way to where it needs to be, and it will find a place it can thrive, and it will do its thing.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about the differences in how you use your regular plumbing in the house, or if you're on a regular municipality sewer system versus if you are hooked up to a septic tank. And this is the key. This is why you want to know which one you are hooked up on, because that determines the things that you should and shouldn't be doing or putting down your drain. Even more importantly than, because we talk about like, don't put fats and greases down, or don't do this down the disposal. But people are like, it doesn't like really affect, they don't see it affecting them, because it really affects the municipality, and they go through a lot of expense and work, especially nowadays. There were some stories out because so many more people were at home and using their systems and clogging up the municipality system, and they have workers that they maintain it and clean it out and do all that extra work, and you don't really see it, so it's not top of mind. But all of a sudden, when you've got a septic tank, you're the municipality that's got to get out there and clean it, and it's your problem. So talk to us about some of those differences in using it.
Yeah, and the bacteria is a perfect segue for that, because one of the big things is that bacteria does a really good job of eating up already processed foods, poop. And so when you're putting in other food,
would that be solids?
Food,
Is that what
Solids. Sorry, guys. And so when you're using a disposal, there's food unprocessed going through there, and the bacteria doesn't keep up with that as well.
Okay.
And so if it's me and I'm on a septic tank, I don't have a disposal.
Okay.
I'm very careful with my kitchen sink. I'm making sure all of the food goes into the garbage can. I have a strainer in the sink to catch it. I do not want it getting into my tank because it will make that bacteria's job harder. And making that job harder means problems for you.
And now, because it's interesting, because when we talked to the plumbers and we talked about an episode on garbage disposals and maybe this comes back to the different kinds of bacteria, because in the municipality system, it's not necessarily an underground closed no oxygen system, right? And so bacteria is okay, and it works on all of those other foods that you would send down the disposal. But you brought up the oxygen in the tank, and there's not supposed to be oxygen in the tank because oxygen will kill the good bacteria in your septic tank, right?
It won't necessarily kill it.
Okay.
But it's not so much that oxygen will be bad for the system. It's just that because it's a sealed system, because you don't want to smell that thing when you go outside, it's a sealed system, and so it's not so much oxygen in the tank. It's that we need to seal it off so that we can't get methane back out.
Gotcha.
And so you need those anaerobics just because you don't have the oxygen in there, and so you need that one in there.
But so that's those bacterias in that tank. Is that why you're not wanting to put all of that extra, rinds and peels?
Yeah,
and
it's
all
not
that stuff
necessarily
down
the bacteria's fault.
Okay.
Just the same as you and I are limited to what we can eat. I'm not going to go eat rocks out of the parking lot. The bacteria is limited to what it can eat as well. And so it's a biological thing.
Did you ever watch Pippi Longstocking, the movie growing up?
The cartoon version?
No, not the cartoon. It was a movie, the live action movie. And I remember, I don't know why she was doing it, but she would eat nails. And I remember my parents, my dad specifically, not sure how dumb I was as a child. But he felt the need.
How you are as an adult, any sign of it.
Easy now. He felt the need to say, you can't eat nails, right? And I'm like,
well, I'm noticing there's no nails on this table.
I've eaten them all. Anyway, you talk about eating rocks, but Pippi, she didn't get the same. She eats different things than us.
She's a bit of an odd duck.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not a normal person.
But she was like really strong. Maybe that was because of the nails.
It's the nails. She's tough as nails.
She is. She had a
go.
horse that lived in the house.
Yeah. But so the bacteria has its limitations. And so it's just, the other thing is the more solid matter you put into that tank, the faster it's going to fill up and need pumping. And that 3 to 5 may turn into 1 to 2, but you're planning on 3 to 5 and you end up with issues. Got it.
Okay. So you recommend not putting a garbage disposal in if you've got a septic system.
It's my recommendation. There are disposals out there that are marketed with 4 septic systems, and what they do is every time you kick it on, it injects a little bit of bacteria that goes with it.
Really?
And they're not wildly effective.
Gotcha. All right. Well, and then the other thing, so make sure you're not sending extra things down the drain, and it's even more important to not be sending things other than toilet paper down the toilet. And
so the same reason that we don't want to put wet wipes, feminine products, things like that into a sewer system, and that, like we mentioned earlier, like you brought up, is that it goes to the municipality and they've got to pull it out of there, and they literally have to pull those things out because they don't break down. And like you were saying, that's their problem at that point. In a septic system, it's your problem. And if they don't break down, they're going to fill that tank up.
Got it. It's also probably a good idea, now that there's such a difference in how we should be using our septic systems. If you invite guests over and you have people visit, make sure you let them know that you're on a septic system.
Yeah.
Because
make a tasteful little sign for the bathroom that gives instruction. Yeah.
Speaking of tasteful little signs in the bathroom, there were 2 that I was a fan of growing up. One, I grew up with all sisters. Okay. And so I didn't realize as a young man how annoying it was to them that I would not raise the toilet seat. And so they would let me know, and it went like this: if you sprinkle when you tinkle, please be neat and wipe the seat. The other one that I like is the one, and I don't know if I've seen it on toilets or at swimming pools, but it's like, I don't come swim in your toilet, so don't pee in my pool or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have one. You notice there's no pee in our ool. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That one. Yeah.
The only
that's a
sign
good
in
one,
our
too.
bathroom is, you have your 5-star ratings on reviews and things, and so it's got one that's 4.5 stars filled in on the sign, and in quotes it just says "would poop here again." We have a 4.5 star bathroom.
People are very
Nice.
clever. Okay, cool. Well, if you're ever out and about in Spanish Fork,
What would make it a 5-star?
get it chasing. He's got a very,
What do they call the guy that spritzes your cologne when you go into the bathroom?
there you go.
That's
There
what
you-
makes it a
yeah.
5-star.
Gotcha. So you don't do that.
A bidet?
Not normally.
Ooh, a bidet
it
might
costs
make it
extra.
a 5-star. That would push
Heated
the
and
top.
cooled. Very
Now we're
nice. I
talking.
like it.
Let's see. Speaking of your 5-star, I have actually, one of the things, the way that my mind works, for a pillar piece of content on social, I've always thought about doing, I would call it the loo review, where I would go around to public restrooms and I would review how good they are. And like, just let people know, hey, like it's time for the loo review.
Having
And I would say,
spent-
this bathroom at this gas station here, it has this rating. And I go and be like, okay, let's give it the sniffy sniff.
that's $1 million idea.
That's $1 million. There's only certain gas stations I stop at.
Having
for
spent
certain,
many years
Yep.
as a technician in the field, that would be an app that would be open on my phone constantly.
Yep. You
Yeah.
learn it.
You know where to
I
go.
learned them real quick.
Oh yeah, there's a particular grocery store line out here that does a very good job with their bathrooms, and they have made a lot of money off of me just because I needed to use their bathroom.
Give them a shout out. Who
It's Harmon's.
Harmon's
Harmon's
got
has the
good bathrooms?
nicest bathrooms.
as far
Well,
as
you feel bad. You go in and use their restroom, and you're like,
You
I
wanna
got to
keep
buy
it clean?
something. I can't
Yeah.
just.
You
I can't just
take
walk
care
in
of
here.
the bathroom. You buy some cookies on your way out.
I'm not
It's
going to lie,
perfect.
out of gas stations, because some of them are notoriously bad.
Oh.
But like Maverick overall
Maverick,
does a pretty
They
good
do.
job.
They're the
Like,
best.
Dude,
keeping
they have
those
nailed the
bathrooms.
C-store thing.
Yeah.
They do a
Yep.
great job.
Okay, I'm not sure how we got sidetracked. We went to Pippi Longstocking, then we went to like signs over the
Your
toilet,
loo
and then
review.
and
Your
then
loo
we went to
review.
loo
Yeah,
review.
that's how we got
Okay,
where
well
we're
let's
at.
get back
And
to
it
this.
rung a bell with all of us. 'Cause
That's
we
right.
clearly-
Well, that's a good sign. That means maybe I'm on the right track.
It's a pillar, just like
If
you said.
anyone's listening and they decide to take that idea, because here's the thing, ideas are no good without execution. So if someone's out there going to execute on the loo review or something like that, at least tag me, let me know that it's happening so I can like see how well
Share
it's
it.
being done. Right.
We were talking about what not to put into your septic system. Should we jump back
Well,
in?
we covered. Is there anything else?
Yes,
like
there
okay.
is.
Well,
There's
well,
plenty.
why did you leave it
Yeah,
out if it was
there's
that
plenty.
important?
We hadn't finished.
Well, we got interrupted by the loo
we
review.
tangented.
All right. What else should we not put
Um,
down our septic
So
system?
one very important thing is anything that will kill.
Look, the way that you were like, very like the other things that you meant in word this very important. I feel like you
Well,
probably
okay.
should have led with this.
How did I say it before? Because
I
it should
don't
be
know.
equal. Did I say just very important?
I
I
don't
think
know,
we're
but,
fighting
like-
for microphone time here.
Hey, we can do that all day.
It makes it more interesting.
It does.
All right, sorry. Let us know about this very important thing
One
that we should not
equally
put in.
important thing is anything that's going to kill bacteria. So acid drain cleaners,
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
antibacterial soap.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, you
Because
betcha.
we're talking about we need bacteria to thrive. You put antibacterial
It says
anything in there.
antibacterial.
Yeah, and it's going to hurt that septic system. So you want to make sure you buy the soap is soap. You know, there's a lot of things out there about antibacterial soap and even sewer systems.
Okay.
You start adding it to septic systems, and it can be devastating to that bacterial colony in there.
That is
a lot of grime and buildup on your modern sewer systems comes from antibacterial soap. Because almost everything you do now in your shower, in your bathtub, cleaning your hands or your body or whatever is antibacterial.
shampoos and things are antibacterial.
Yep, you can get.
You can get them that say, if it says antibacterial on there,
'Cause I
it's
think of
hurting your
hand
septic
soaps.
system. Yeah.
But
Yeah. I'm
primarily
not saying
hand soaps.
everybody use. I'm just saying you can get them, and it's widely used because it says antibacterial, and people are trying to be preventative.
good to know.
But it's.
I don't
cause and
know that
effect.
anyone would have thought of that. So septic
we're here
system, 1, no garbage disposal. 2, no chemical drain cleaners. 3, no antibacterial
Anything.
soap
Yeah.
or anything
Antibacterial. Don't put it down the drain.
Interesting. All right. Anything else that is very important or equally as important that we should not be putting down?
Well, we talked about wet wipes and things as
We did.
well. And then even your toilet paper is important. You can go to the store, and some of them are labeled septic safe. And the big difference is how they break down and how fast they break down. And so some of your more comfortable toilet papers don't break down as quickly in the system, and so they get into a septic tank, and they can cause a lot of issues there as well.
Sounds like having a septic system is a lot like being gluten intolerant.
It is, but it still beats an
lactose
outhouse.
intolerant.
Still
no,
beats
no,
an
no. Yeah, no.
outhouse.
I'm not saying that's not good, but like you just have to be more aware when you're shopping for soap, toilet paper, different things like that.
Just one more time that the body and the home are such good comparisons.
Okay, so let's move into, unless you want anything else.
I'm good.
Okay, let's move into some of the most common problems that people have with their septic systems.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Oh man, I'm backup.
Okay,
I'll just start there. So I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Is
are the reasons why it backs up different than like? I mean, do you still have the tree roots, the misalignments, the bellies, and things like that?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and you have all of that. Plus, you're putting down the wrong thing. So if you have too much antibacterial stuff like we just talked about, so you don't have enough bacteria, so the grime and the sludge builds up and comes back on you, or you've put feminine products or other things down there that would clog the pipe that leaves the home and tries to enter the tank. So a lot of all of the common problems we would suffer from on a modern day sewer system are still the same, but then you have all of the old ones like we just discussed that can be a problem. And so one of the biggest issues or the biggest inconveniences is when your tank gets full and it decides to back up on you. It's not a matter of running a cable down and clearing it. You almost cannot do that because if you go into the tank with your cable, it'll coil up, tangle, and be caught. You have to wait for a pump company to come pump out. And so if they're busy, they can't get to you today, it might be tomorrow, you're now down permanently until you can pump the system out and have somewhere for the excess waste to go, including cleaning up your house and things like that. So a septic backup can be quite a bit more inconvenient depending on the situation, circumstances.
Well, like we mentioned earlier, up to the tank is the very same as a regular sewer system. And so you still have pipe, and usually that tank's going to be pretty close to the house. In most newer systems, it's 15 to 30 feet, give or take. Sometimes it is 100 feet away from the house, depending on the property. And so you still have a lot of pipe that can have offsets, that can have roots, that can have this, can have that, and have all the same problems that a sewer system has. But then you also have, you mentioned roots, and in a drain field, one of the episodes we talked about sewer lines and how roots get into them and things. And in a drain field, in a sewer system, the pipe has to open up, and it's supposed to be sealed, and then the roots get in. In a drain field of a septic system, there are holes by design. There are openings that water's escaping through because it has to, and the roots will find that and get into a drain field and completely fill it in as well.
Gotcha.
And so, yes, a lot of the same problems.
Now, when that happens, you have to replace the
there's
drain field.
and one of the really unfortunate side effects of a septic system is that, and we talked about cameras last time and their awesome ability to get into a sewer system and see what's wrong with it. And we can do the same thing in a septic system up to the tank. Once you hit the tank, A, you're not going to be able to get past it because of how it's made. You can't get a camera in and then out the other side. And B, once you hit that tank, you go blind. It's full of all that dirty water and you can't see anything. And so when it comes to diagnosing anything from the tank and out, there's a lot more guesswork involved than there is with a sewer system. And sometimes it starts with digging a hole to find out what's going on. And so the awesome technology we have for sewer systems only applies up to the tank in a septic system, and then you go blind.
Any other common problems? You got backups, you got the roots, all that stuff. Any other? And I guess we've actually been talking about, if you end up with the slimy stuff out at the leach field, or you don't have the right amount of bacteria, or the tank fills up with too much of the sludge at the bottom, or all of those different things. And I guess the solutions are a little bit different depending on what the problem is. We've talked about the solutions as we've gone along. Any other major failure points?
There is one thing that we haven't talked much about. We've talked a lot about failures in the drain field and things, but the tank itself, most of them hold up really well. But a lot of them are concrete, and concrete has a lifespan. The pipes have a lifespan just like anything else. And so that concrete can crack and age and separate, and then you can run into issues there with water leaking out where it's not supposed to. And now when you're talking about a septic system, as long as it's just the water leaking out, it's really no different than it getting out of the drain field. But if that crack gets down into the solids, you start having issues there. But then you also have dirt and things falling into the tank if a crack gets big enough. And so there are times where a tank can cause the problems in addition to just the drain field too.
When you have the tank pumped, are they supposed to pump all of it out?
Yes.
At that point, is it a good idea, or is it standard practice to send a camera down the tank to inspect that, or how do you inspect
Most
those?
of the time, it's just a matter of take a look.
Just crawl down.
Yeah, camera. There are certain very specific types of cameras.
The lids are big enough you could crawl into them?
Some of them.
Most people could fit in. Yeah. It depends.
Why do you say that looking at me?
Because we usually send down
Just
small
because we're talking to you.
I don't think that's what it was.
I don't think I've looked
think
away from you this whole time. Don't put this
I
on
don't
me.
appreciate
so you were
you
waiting
putting
the
words
whole
in my
time to make a
mouth.
fat
What's
joke.
going on here?
Now I can talk to Jesse. We got that out of the way.
As I
so
chuckle in my
most of the
belly
time
jiggles.
it's a matter. It is somewhat standard practice for those pump companies to clean it out, see what they can in there, look for any obvious signs of cracks and things. But sometimes you won't know it's there and even if a crack forms and you can see it, there's not a good way to fix it outside of replacing the tank.
And yes, the answer to the question is yes. A physical get down in there when it's pumped out, physical with your eyes.
It just
inspection.
sounds gross.
Yeah, it does. It is gross.
it's
Most people
disgusting.
wear a bodysuit when you do it.
Okay.
So
Bodysuit, huh?
yeah,
The hazmat.
Oh, the hazmat
Yeah,
kind.
yeah.
Okay. Any
Not a sumo suit. We just talked about that.
sumo? They wear diapers.
With the suits, the ones that inflate.
Oh, gotcha. Those
Make
wouldn't
you
fit.
not most people that could fit into a septic tank.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. I had somewhere where I was going to go with this next, but that is derailed. That's where it was. So let's say that someone has an issue, whether it's a backup or whatever. Do they need to let a plumbing company or a drain company know that, like, hey, I've got a septic system? Because do some companies not work on septic systems?
So, some companies don't work on them, but more importantly, like Jesse mentioned earlier, running a cable into a septic tank is a very big problem. And so it's very important to A, know that you have a septic tank, and B, if you do come into a situation where you need to call a professional out, they need to know you have a septic system as well, just because there's a lot of risk to running a cable. We've had plenty of times where it goes too far, gets inside that tank, ties itself into a knot, and it's not coming
Can't get
back.
it back.
And so it's very important to know you have the tank, and if you know where the tank is, point that out to them as well so they can get a good footage guess on it. Sometimes, too, is when you run that cable, not only will you get stuck in there, you can actually break the baffle off. So there's that baffle inside when the pipe gets into the tank, it's got a baffle there to direct things around. And if you hit that too hard with the cable, you can actually break that off, and then it's not there anymore, and so the system won't function properly.
Gotcha.
And so it's very important to let them know.
and a cable's one thing, and then you get a camera down there, and you lose a camera head. Those are things that sometimes, but not all the times, the homeowner can be responsible for those costs. And camera heads are very expensive. Cables are expensive, and you're not doing any good. And so just shoving one down there is not going to diagnose or fix anything. So to lose something like that that's costly is really just very ineffective. So it's very, very, very good practice to let whoever's working on it know, or working on your system, know you have a septic system.
So let's just go back in this. If someone is experiencing any of these problems and they know they've got a septic system, what should they do?
So first thing is get it pumped. Most of the time, like I said, if people know they have a system and they're good about their maintenance, they've done it somewhat recently. If it hasn't been pumped within a year or so and you're experiencing those backups and things, it's very good practice to pump it first.
Okay.
And then if you're still having problems, call a professional you trust to come out and, again, let them know you have a septic system, and then it may end up being a problem in the pipe before the septic tank as well. So pumping, keeping up with your maintenance, keeping bacteria, that's going to be the first thing to do. But then if you're having backups and after pumping, still get somebody out there to cable it like a sewer system, just letting them know that it's not a normal sewer system.
Yeah, know where your access is too. That's an item that eats up a lot of time for anybody, whether it's to the pump company, the plumber, whatever. But if you know where your access is as well, you can go check if you're having a backup, and you may not be full. So at that point, you wouldn't need to have a pump truck come out, or a pump company. You would call a plumber or a drain company and have them clear, because chances are it's going to be in that pipe or somewhere in the home. But knowing where your access is will tell you, or give you a good direction of who you should call and what direction you need to take at that time.
Well, and I want to clarify one thing that we probably should have done earlier, but define full for a septic system.
Yep.
Okay.
Good point.
It is meant to be full of water and things all the time. That's how it operates. And so the water comes in, fills the tank up to a certain level, so then it goes out. And so when we say a full septic tank, having things in it is normal. It should have that. Full, in the way we're using it, is too much solid, and so the water can't escape like it's supposed to. And that's when you have a problem. So if you open the lid, and there's several different ways like Jesse said, it's very important to know where that is. And if you don't know where that is, some of the cameras that we use for sewer lines can get you close. They can locate where it ties into the sewer, or where the pipe ties into the tank, and that'll get you within a few feet of the lid. Most of the old lids are a concrete lid with a rebar handle, and a lot of metal detectors can find those. But then you might be looking for days if there's other metal in your yard too. But when you open that lid and you look down in there, you're going to see that slime level on top. And if it's down below the level of the water coming in, and one way you can kind of test that, and depending on how far apart the elevation of the water in and the water out are, if you run some water with that lid open, you should be able to hear it trickle in, or at least see the surface move.
Gotcha.
But if it's up above that inlet so that the water has nowhere to go into, then your tank is what we're calling full. It's got too many solids to let the water out.
Cool.
You open up the lid and it's coming up the chase for your lid. Too full.
Yep.
Got it.
So, but yeah, the tank
should be below the top of the tank itself.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Anything else before we close this episode? Who'd have thought that you'd have a full episode on septic systems?
There's always more we could add to it. But
septic systems, like I said, still used today. They don't use concrete containers as much as plastic ones, pre-built plastic ones, so they don't crack. But they're still used in a ton of areas, like here in Utah, Woodland Hills. You know where that is, right? That's mostly all septic and lift stations because of where they live, and how the ground and everything is laid out there.
Let's actually just key areas that most people, if you live in Utah, that you would know. Are there any other major communities or major places where you know they've got a lot of septic systems?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I was thinking of this earlier. So you have like Elk Ridge and Woodland Hills over there, and some areas in Salem and Payson. A lot of older areas, older communities, rural, exactly. A lot of places along the bench, Highland, Alpine, areas like that. That's a specific one that you should pay attention to maintaining. If you have one, because they have a very specific rule that they have in place where they've actually gone through and redone a lot of roads and done sewer lateral stub-ins into most homeowners' yards, because once your septic system fails, whether it be the tank or the leach fields, the rule is you're done.
You have
with
to upgrade.
Exactly. You're done with your septic system. It cannot be replaced. You have to tie in, and so that's another reason to stay on your maintenance, because you can get to get the longest life expectancy out of your system before your hand is forced to do something else. Am I missing any others along the?
You sound like you've got south down pretty well. Up north, there's some areas around Ogden. You go out West Haven area, Hooper. A lot of those areas are on septic tanks. Hooper has got a whole different kind of system we could spend a whole episode on in some of their areas.
For those listening that don't speak Utah, Hooper is spelled Hooper.
That's not Utah.
I'm
very
an
true.
Oregonian.
I've been corrected many times.
Yeah, but you've been here and you're like,
I've been here a while.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
But there's Park City's got a lot of septic tanks. Anywhere where homes are very spread out, what it comes down to, if we're being just totally honest about it, is brass tacks. The city has to be able to justify the expense of putting in a sewer system before they'll do it. And so if you have those areas where homes are very spread out and they're not going to be servicing a ton of homes, they may not do it. And so if you have real spread out houses in rural areas, mountainous areas, things like that, you may be on a septic system.
Got it. Okay. Anything else?
I think we've got it.
Yep. All right. Well, that's the show. We'll be back with a new episode of In the House next Tuesday. I'd like to thank Jesse and Chasen for being here and telling us everything they know about septic systems and a few other things. But I'd also like to thank everyone behind the scenes that helped make the show possible. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. Wait, weren't you all going to join in? Okay, so we'll go again. I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to
In the House.
See ya.